city, Frank was wandering, collecting necessities when the alarm sirens began to wail. He immediately ran through the deserted streets, hiding when necessary and fleeing from the screams and the relentless sounds of destruction all around. When black smoke engulfed the entire city, Frank sought refuge in a secluded house in the countryside, where he discovered 2 abandoned children. He picked them up and reassured them that everything would be all right. 15 years passed, and the 2 boys grew up healthy and strong. Every day, they repeated the same routine. They went out during the day to search for supplies, but when night fell, they were completely hidden away. As soon as the sun began to set, Jude immediately boarded up all the windows with wooden planks and called the dog, Rocco. Inside the house, Frank waited outside until he saw Tony return, then scolded him for being late. Tony explained that he enjoyed helping the neighbors, specifically the Rose family, who owned a nearby farm. Afterwards, all 3 made sure all doors and windows were securely locked before sitting down to dinner. Frank chastised Tony once more, warning him that if he was late again, he would not be allowed to leave the area around the house. Jude immediately teased his younger brother about this, and in a moment, the brothers' bickering turned into an actual brawl. Frank immediately separated them, reminding them that they were men, not animals. After dinner, Frank sat watching his sons play chess, but his attention was distracted when Rocco began scratching and making noises on the floor. Sensing danger, Frank and Tony went downstairs, when they suddenly heard a loud banging on the door. It seemed the monsters were trying to break in, so they quickly held the door shut to prevent it from being breached. The noise and relentless banging lasted for several minutes, until the monsters gave up and left. After the incident, Tony blamed Jude for not helping to hold the door. But Jude explained that he had deliberately observed how the monsters behaved. He analyzed that there were 3 waves of attack. The first lasted 10 seconds, the second 20 seconds, and the last only 1 second. Jude believed the first was just a test, the second was the real attempt to break in, and the last was just an angry hit. The next day, they went to check the door and saw deep claw marks etched into the wood. The door would not survive another night, so David and his 2 sons had to go out and find more wood. For reinforcement, they brought all the collected materials back home. While Tony chopped wood, David stopped by the workshop to see what Jude was doing. After David repeatedly pressed him, Jude confessed that he was trying to build a car because he was tired of the feeling of being confined and afraid. However, he couldn't get it to work yet. Frank was impressed and quickly inspected it, making a slight adjustment that got the car started. Excited, Frank took his sons out for a test drive and taught them how to drive. After an hour, they returned home and reminded them that the windows still needed more reinforcement. So he immediately sent his sons to the river for materials. Tony, because he had been promised he could go to the farm today. But David insisted it was a more important task that needed to be done. The 2 brothers drove off, and Tony began complaining to Jude, suggesting that David only told him to come along to keep an eye on his younger brother. Jude, on the other hand, felt he didn't need anyone to protect him, so they started arguing again. As they passed the Rose farm, Tony jumped out of the car and told Jude to come back for him later. At home, Frank had finished reinforcing the door and stopped to rest alone near the waterfall. While looking around, he noticed a dark and frightening hole in the cliff face. At the same time, Jude arrived at the river, tied a rope securely to the car, and then climbed down, using an old abandoned boat to search for useful items. Inside a cabinet, Jude discovered a suggestive photo, which surprised him for a moment. Then, as he looked closer inside, he suddenly panicked when a swarm of small insects flew out of a pile of rubbish. They buzzed around him and tried to land on his skin, forcing Jude to hastily run outside. At the farm, Tony helped the Rose family with work. But his main reason for being there was soon clear. Ariana, the farm owner's, it was obvious, daughter. They both had feelings for each other. They walked around the farm together. Ariana showed Tony the rope tied to a tree, recounting that when she was little, she was only allowed to play outside if she touched the tree. So she tied herself to the tree so she could run around more freely, while still maintaining the connection. The two also played a game of guessing, the bizarre reasons that might have caused the world to collapse. When it was time for Tony to leave, Ariana hugged him tightly. The sun began to set, and the two brothers had to move quickly. When David returned home, he was worried when he saw Rocco, but no sign of his two sons. Jude returned to the car initially. It wouldn't start, but after a few attempts, he managed to get it running. Meanwhile, Tony was running at full speed when he tripped and fell into a crevice in the ground, arriving at the meeting point and not seeing his brother. Jude drove on when he returned home and recounted the incident. Frank told Jude to go inside and lock up, while he and Rocco went back to find Tony in the crevice. Tony woke up severely injured. He used his lighter to shine around and was horrified to see a creature crawling out of a hole in the rock face. It even let out a shriek. The sound reached David and Rocco slowly. Tony took his small knife and stabbed the monster's hand, forcing it to retract. But immediately after, from above, another creature lunged down and grabbed Tony's face, making it hard for him to breathe. Just as Tony was about to pass out, Frank appeared in time, pulling the monster off and killing it. Once they were sure Tony was okay, Frank and Rocco discovered a tunnel leading straight out of the crevice. It was too dangerous to cross the woods, so they decided to stay in the hole until morning for shelter, and sealed off the entrance. But soon after, they heard noises from inside the rock face. The monsters were tunneling underground and burying the exit with dirt and rocks, trapping the group in the crevice, while Rocco barked incessantly and the ground shook non-stop. Frank told his son and the dog to step back, while he shoved a flare into the open hole. As the monsters crawled out, Frank detonated it, creating a large explosion, but he was also caught in the blast. Jude heard many strange sounds and began to formulate a plan. A moment later, he sat right in front of the main door, tied a rope to a chair, and pretended to sleep. Not long after, a creature moved the plank, covering a gap in the door, extending a long claw to test if Jude was actually asleep. When he didn't move, the monster crawled in. Just then, Jude yanked the rope, causing the trap on the ceiling to collapse, trapping the bizarre creature. When it was morning, Jude started to worry because his father and brother had not returned. So he drove off to search. Jos, then covered in injuries, Tony had dug through the block dirt, clearing the exit, and managed to pull David out. Rocco followed, heard the engine noise, and led Jude to reunite with his family. The two brothers quickly worked together to get David into the car and drove home, setting him down to rest. While discussing what to do next, Tony suddenly discovered the trap. When he lifted the cloth covering it, the trapped creature went frantic, shrieking fiercely. Jude quickly covered the cloth back, saying that light caused the creature's pain. Afterward, the two brothers tended to David's wounds. Meanwhile, Jude recounted that the night before, it only took the monster 8 seconds to crawl into the house. The fastest ever. He was also sure a second one had left. Their behavior was changing very quickly, and Jude thought something was unusual. Tony suggested that the creatures were intelligent. They had killed a few in the crevice yesterday, and perhaps they came here for revenge, because Ariana had said almost never appeared on our family's land. Jude didn't believe Tony had killed any. He thought only David could do that. To prove himself right, Tony intended to kill the trapped monster, but Jude tried to stop him. wanting to keep it for study. During the struggle, the monster quickly escaped and hid under the bed. When it reappeared, Rocco barked loudly. The monster immediately prepared to attack. Jude lunged to restrain it, while Tony used an axe to chop off the creature's head. Even so, Jude wanted to learn more. So he took the carcass to the workshop and dissected it right in front of Rocco and countless insects buzzing around. But no matter how he cut it, he couldn't understand its nature. At that moment, Tony suggested they should take David to Ariana's house, because the conditions and medicine there were better. June truly believed the Rose family wouldn't help, but Tony forced him to come along. The two brothers placed Frank into the car and drove to the farm. Indeed, Jude's words were correct. Ariana's parents didn't have enough medicine for treatment and didn't want to take in such a severely injured person. Ariana strongly protested, but no one listened. Her parents only allowed Tony to stay, leaving the burden of David to Jude. Therefore, Jude quickly left. When Tony ran after him, the two argued. Jude blamed Tony, saying he would be the cause of their father's death. In a fit of rage, Tony threw his brother to the ground and choked him. But when he realized what he was doing, he immediately stopped. Jude quickly got into the car with his Komodo's father and drove away, leaving Tony behind with the Rose family. Afterward, Ariana brought Tony some genuinely good food and showed him a few objects he had never seen before. The two young people had a sweet time together and shared a kiss. But Ariana's father appeared immediately, ushering his daughter into another room. On the way home, Jude saw flocks of sheep running around in fear, along with mounds of earth rising everywhere, a sign that the creatures were digging and moving underground. When he arrived home, he noticed a dirt line right against the wall. Fearing that they were already right under the foundation, after tending to his father, Jude went to the workshop and began gathering supplies to form a new plan. He also went around the house to seal off the windows, while stepping over the rug. Jude suddenly stumbled and fell, discovering a hole underneath. That meant the monsters had managed to get inside the house. At the farm, Ariana caught Tony rummaging in the kitchen. He was still worried about his father, so he wanted to find some medicine and leave. Ariana gave Tony, which moved him. He hugged her and promised to return. Unbeknownst to them, someone was listening in on everything. The medicine. Tony ran outside, but as he neared the gate, a farm worker pointing at a gun and accused him of stealing. Tony frantically tried to explain that Ariana had given him the medicine, but the man didn't believe him. Other workers also gathered, tied Tony up, and dragged him into the garage. They turned up the music loudly so no one could hear what was about to happen. One person held Tony down while another prepared to shoot him. Just then, the ground beneath their feet suddenly cracked open, forming a hole, causing the man with the gun to fall in, making his shot miss. The remaining workers rushed over and panicked to look, when a monster suddenly leapt out of the hole inside the main house. Ariana's parents woke up upon hearing strange sounds. The father took a candle to go check, when a creature suddenly burst into the room and attacked him. The candle fell to the floor and the fire quickly flared up. The monster leapt from the father to the mother. Intending to kill both, the father struggled to pull the monster off, while the mother ran out of the room to find her daughter. But before she could get far, the monster leapt onto her. It changed shape and began vomiting a liquid onto her before attacking. In her room, Ariana clearly heard her parents being murdered. When the noise stopped, she opened the door and was horrified to see a trail of blood on the floor. She followed the trail until she found the monster in the bathroom. In the garage, the workers tried to fight off the creatures, but completely failed one after another. Those who were lucky enough to run outside were also pursued, as more and more monsters appeared. The garage soon caught fire. Tony seized the opportunity to knock over the wooden cabinet where he was tied, breaking off a piece of wood to free his hands. Just then, a creature spotted him, but before it could attack, Ariana appeared and struck it down. The two quickly ran outside. Tony saw the house was on fire. Ariana tearfully said that her parents were dead, so they decided to run to Tony's house. Back with Jude, he threw a pile of objects down the hole to buy time. Afterward, Jude looked at his still comatose father, gently kissed his forehead, and prepared for battle. The front door suddenly opened, but it turned out to be Tony and Ariana. Jude said he needed Tony's help, but the conversation stopped when David finally woke up. He immediately took his medicine and told his sons not to give up. Jude presented the plan. The group worked together to gather all the gas cans in the garage, while Rocco barked loudly. Signaling danger, they also pushed an old freezer into the house. Tony and Ariana sealed the remaining windows, while Jude piled up belongings, pouring all the gasoline over them. On top, he placed all the explosives he could find, along with his father's half-smoked cigarette. Suddenly, the pile of objects covering the hole began to shake. At the same time, a monster climbed down the chimney right into the room where David was, when another one crawled up from the hole. As it passed through the door, Tony stabbed it from behind. The monster immediately fought back, but Tony pulled out his knife and plunged it straight into its head, killing it completely, instantly. A third one lunged at Ariana, but she quickly shot it down. The two quickly ran to find Jude. The group worked together to push the freezer. Just then, the back door burst open, revealing David covered in blood, having killed the creature in the fireplace. Frank fired his pistol repeatedly at the floor, aiming to take down the monsters digging underneath, but there were too many. They quickly flooded the hallway and rushed straight towards him. Frank delivered a powerful kick to the first one, causing the noise and impact to knock several others to the ground. A few still got up, but his two sons immediately rushed in to finish them off before they could harm their father. Frank was surprised to see the three young people coordinate so seamlessly. Immediately afterward, the two brothers and Rocco ran towards the freezer. But Frank did not follow. He closed the door, determined to stay behind to buy time for the group to escape. They all climbed inside the freezer. Frank then remembered the old days. He tightly held the two babies and said that everything would be all right. A new pack of monsters appeared. Frank drew all their attention until the pile of belongings exploded, causing the entire house to collapse in a sea of fire. The freezer began to roll. When it stopped, the children climbed out, desperately searching for their father in the wreckage. But suddenly a monster lunged out. The group hastily ran to the car and drove away while the monster, engulfed in flames, chased after them. Ariana's shots had no effect. When the monster got close, she smashed her gun directly into it, causing it to fall after driving a few miles. The group stopped the car and looked up at the star-filled sky, a sight they had never seen before, as they had been confined inside the house every night for so many years. The next morning, the group returned to where the house once stood. They decided not to rebuild in this spot. After taking everything they could salvage, they buried all their loved ones and said their final goodbyes. Then, the three young people got into the car and continued their journey, hoping to find new people and a new home. What do you think of this movie? Please leave your comments below to let us know. Thank you for following along.